I pulled into the dusty shoulder of that desert road, hands shaking on the wheel. Mom sat in the passenger seat, barely conscious, her breath shallow and uneven. The fabric of her floral dress was dark with sweat, and her skin had taken on a grayish tint that terrified me. Talia's voice still rang in my ears from that morning. "It's her or me, Michael. Choose." And God help me, I chose wrong. I told myself I'd just leave her somewhere with shade, maybe near a gas station where someone would find her quickly. But the heat was brutal. The nearest town was miles behind us, and when I looked at my mother's pale, fevered face, the face that had smiled at every school play, every graduation, every milestone of my life, something inside me snapped. I opened her door. The hinges creaked in the silence. I helped her out, her arm so light in my hands, it felt like holding a bird. And then I drove away. The guilt hit me before I'd gone a mile, but I kept driving. The rearview mirror showed nothing but empty road and shimmering heat. My name is Michael Torres, and for 38 years I'd been a decent man. Or so I thought. I had a good job in accounting at a mid-sized firm downtown, a nice house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage, and a lawn I actually mowed myself. I had a wife who turned heads when we walked into a restaurant, who knew exactly how to laugh at a client's jokes and make them feel like the most important person in the world. Talia was beautiful, ambitious, expensive. She wanted things. Trips to Europe where we'd post photos in front of the Eiffel Tower, designer furniture that cost more than my first car, a life that looked perfect on Instagram. And I wanted to give them to her because when Talia was happy, when her green eyes lit up and she wrapped her arms around my neck, I felt like I'd won something. Mom had been living with us for 8 months. She'd gotten sick, something with her lungs, the doctors said, a chronic condition that made breathing difficult and left her exhausted after the smallest tasks. She couldn't manage on her own anymore. Dad had died 2 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving her alone in that little house on Maple Street where I grew up, where the kitchen still smelled like the cinnamon rolls she used to make every Sunday. When she moved in, Talia smiled and said all the right things. She helped Mom unpack, set up the guest room with fresh flowers, even cooked a welcome dinner. But the smile faded fast. "She's making me crazy, Michael," Talia would say, her voice tight with irritation as we lay in bed at night. "The way she shuffles around at 3 in the morning, I can hear every step, every cough. The smell of her medications is everywhere. I didn't sign up to run a nursing home. I tried to keep the peace. I hired a part-time nurse named Patricia who came 3 times a week. I promised Talia we'd look into assisted living facilities, showed her brochures for places with gardens and activities, but nothing was ever enough. The complaints got sharper. The silences got colder. Talia started sleeping in the guest bedroom downstairs, away from Mom's room. She stopped cooking dinner, stopped asking about my day. The house felt like a minefield where any wrong step could trigger an explosion. And then, 3 days ago, Talia handed me an ultimatum. "I'm leaving," she said, standing in our bedroom with her arms crossed, her face hard and beautiful, in the afternoon light streaming through the window. "Unless you do something about your mother. I mean it, Michael. I can't live like this anymore. I'm dying in this house." "She's my mother," I said weakly, "and I'm your wife, or I was. You need to decide who matters more." I should have told her to go. I should have stood up for the woman who'd raised me alone after Dad's factory closed, who'd worked 2 jobs, one at the diner, one cleaning offices at night, to put me through college, who'd never once asked me for anything until she had no choice. But I was weak. I was terrified of losing Talia, of being alone, of admitting I'd married someone who could say such things. The thought of coming home to an empty house, of sleeping in an empty bed, of starting over at 38, felt impossible. So when Mom's fever spiked that morning, and she asked me in her weak, apologetic voice to drive her to the clinic, I saw an opportunity, a terrible, unforgivable opportunity. The desert stretched out on both sides of the highway, endless and indifferent. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels in the distance, their arms raised as if in warning. Mom dozed in the seat beside me, trusting me completely, her head tilted against the window. Every few minutes she'd cough, a wet, rattling sound that made my chest tighten, and I drove past the clinic, past the last gas station with its flickering neon sign, out into the nothing. When I finally stopped, there was no one around for miles, just sand and rock and the brutal sun hanging overhead like a judgment. I helped Mom out of the car, led her to a spot with a few scrubby bushes that provided almost no shade. She looked up at me, confused. "Michael, where are we?" "Just wait here, Mum, I'll be right back." "But the clinic—" "Just wait." I got back in the car, started the engine. She called my name once, her voice thin and bewildered. I didn't look back. I just drove. I don't know how long Joanna had been walking that road. She told me later she'd been out there for hours, maybe longer, after her ancient Honda broke down near the state line. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with sun-weathered skin and tired eyes that had seen too much disappointment. Her clothes were worn but clean, her sneakers held together with duct tape. She'd been walking toward town, following the highway because she had nowhere else to go, when she saw something in the dirt about 20 yards off the road, a crumpled shape that didn't belong in that landscape of stone and sand. My mother. Joanna ran, her feet kicking up dust. Mom was lying on her side, barely breathing, her lips cracked and bleeding from the heat. The fever had gotten worse. She was burning up under that merciless sun, and her eyes had rolled back in her head. "Mom? Mom? Can you hear me?" Joanna knelt beside her, her knees sinking into the hot sand as she checked for a pulse. It was there, but weak and erratic. That's when she noticed the little girl. Hannah couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, though there was something in her eyes that seemed older. She appeared from behind a cluster of desert brush, walking with an odd, calm certainty that seemed out of place in this emptiness. She wore a faded blue dress with small white flowers on it, the kind of dress you'd see in an old photograph, and she carried a small metal canteen that looked military-issue, dented and worn. "She needs water," Anna said simply, her voice clear and steady. Joanna blinked, startled. "Where did you come from? Are you alone out here?" Anna didn't answer the question. She just unscrewed the canteen with practiced efficiency and held it carefully to Mum's lips, tilting it just enough that a few drops went in without choking her. Mum coughed weakly, her whole body convulsing, then swallowed. A little color returned to her cheeks, just a shade. "We have to get her out of the sun," Joanna said, looking around frantically. The nearest real shelter was miles away, but there was a rocky outcrop about 50 feet away that might provide some shade. "Help me lift her," Joanna said to Anna. Together, though Anna seemed to do very little actual lifting, and yet somehow everything felt lighter, as if the air itself was helping. They moved Mum toward the rocks. She was dead weight, unconscious, but still breathing. They laid her down in the narrow strip of shade, and Joanna used her denim jacket as a pillow. Anna dampened a corner of her dress with water from the canteen and pressed it gently to Mum's forehead, her small hands moving with surprising confidence. "What's your name, honey?" Joanna asked the girl, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was racing. "Anna. Are you out here alone? Where are your parents?" "Not anymore," Anna said, which didn't really answer anything. "Not anymore what?" "Alone. None of us are alone now." It was a strange answer, but Joanna didn't push. There was something about this child that made questions feel unnecessary, even rude. Instead, she focused on keeping Mom alive. She used more water from Anna's canteen. Where had a little girl gotten a canteen in the middle of the desert, and tried to keep Mom's fever from climbing? The minutes crawled by like hours. The sun beat down with physical weight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a truck appeared on the horizon. Joanna ran into the middle of the highway, waving her arms desperately. The truck slowed, a beat-up Ford with a faded blue paint job, and the driver, a gruff man named Eddie with a salt-and-pepper beard and suspicious eyes, rolled down his window. "What's going on?" "There's a woman dying out here. She needs help. Please." Eddie looked past her to where Mom lay in the shade, with Anna sitting beside her like a small guardian. Something in his face softened. "Get her in the truck. There's a clinic in Salvation Wells about 30 miles up." They lifted Mom into the truck bed as carefully as they could. Anna climbed in beside her without being asked, continuing to dab water on Mom's forehead. Joanna sat in the cab with Eddie, who radioed ahead to the clinic on an old CB radio. "This is Eddie Morrison. Got a woman here with heat stroke, maybe worse. Coming in hot." The static crackled back. "Bring her straight to Dr. Reyes. We'll be ready." Salvation Wells was barely a town, more like a collection of buildings that had given up trying to be anything else. Sun-bleached wood, cracked pavement, storefronts with faded signs advertising businesses that might not exist anymore. But the clinic was real. Dr. Reyes met them at the door, a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair, pulled back in a bun, and hands that moved with swift efficiency. "Heat stroke, dehydration, and she's got pneumonia on top of it, Doctor," Reyes said after a quick examination. her stethoscope pressed to Mom's chest. Another hour and she wouldn't have made it. Who left her out there? Joanna didn't have an answer. She just shook her head, feeling a rage building in her chest at whoever could do such a thing. Does she have any identification? Dr. Reyes asked. Joanna checked Mom's pockets and found a worn wallet. Inside was a driver's license, Mary Torres, and a photo of a young man in a graduation cap, smiling broadly. On the back, in faded ink, "My Michael. So proud." "She has a son," Joanna said quietly, staring at the photo. "How could a son do this?" Anna, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the examination room, spoke up. "People do terrible things when they're afraid." Dr. Reyes glanced at the girl. "Wise words for someone so young. Where are your parents, honey?" "Around," Anna said, which was another non-answer. They got Mom stabilized over the next several hours. IV fluids, antibiotics, cooling blankets. Dr. Reyes worked with the focused intensity of someone who'd seen too much death to let it win without a fight. By evening, Mom's fever had broken. She was sleeping more naturally, her breathing steady. But she wasn't out of danger yet. "She needs rest and monitoring," Dr. Reyes said. "At least a few days, maybe a week." "I can watch her," Joanna said immediately. "The clinic doesn't have overnight facilities. We're not equipped for that." "Then I'll find a place." Joanna had $73 in her wallet, everything she owned in the world. She'd been on her way to Phoenix hoping to find work, hoping to start over after her last job had fallen through and her landlord had evicted her. But she couldn't just leave this woman alone, not after finding her abandoned in the desert like garbage. She found a small house for rent on the edge of town, a sun-faded yellow building with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen that smelled like old grease. The landlord, a weary woman named Mrs. Chen, quoted a price. Joanna used all her money for the first week's rent. "You're staying here?" Anna asked when they moved Mom in, settling her into the larger bedroom. "We're staying here," Joanna corrected. "You're not going back out into that desert." Anna smiled, and for just a moment, Joanna could have sworn the little girl's eyes reflected light in a way that wasn't quite natural. But it was probably just the sunset coming through the window. Meanwhile, I was falling apart. I'd made it home, walked through the door into the air-conditioned silence and collapsed on the couch. My hands were still shaking. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. The house felt enormous and empty, like a museum dedicated to my failure as a human being. Talia came downstairs an hour later, fresh from a shower, her hair still damp. She saw my face and understood immediately. "You did it," she said. Not a question. "I left her," I whispered, the words scraping out of my throat. "I left my mother in the desert." I expected relief from Talia, gratitude maybe, a kiss on the forehead, and a promise that everything would be better now. Instead, she stared at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe, her beautiful face twisted with disgust. "You're pathetic," she said. "What?" "I thought you were weak, Michael, but this—" She grabbed her purse from the counter, the expensive leather one I'd bought her for our anniversary. "I'm done. I don't want to be married to someone who could do that." "But you told me to—" "I told you to handle it. Put her in a home, hire more help, move her somewhere else, I don't care. I didn't tell you to dump her like garbage in the middle of nowhere." She headed for the door, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. "My lawyer will be in touch, don't try to contact me." "Talia, wait." But she was gone. The door slammed, and a moment later I heard her car start in the driveway. She drove away without looking back, and I sat there in the empty house, drowning in a guilt so thick I could barely breathe. I tried calling Mom's phone. No answer, just straight to voicemail, her cheerful recorded voice saying, "You've reached Mary. Leave a message and I'll call you back." Except she wouldn't call me back, she might never call anyone back. I drove back out to that stretch of highway as the sun was setting, turning the sky blood red. I searched for hours, my headlights cutting through the darkness, but there was no sign of her. No body, no trace, nothing. The desert had swallowed her up. Panic turned to despair, turned to a kind of numb horror. I was sure she was dead, and it was my fault. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in the dark living room, waiting for the police to knock on my door and tell me they'd found her body. The knock never came. Days passed. I called in sick to work, then stopped calling at all. I let the mail pile up. I drank coffee at dawn and whiskey at midnight, and felt nothing in between except the crushing weight of what I'd done. 3 days later, a man named Andrew Solis appeared at my door. I almost didn't answer. But the knocking was persistent, polite but insistent, and eventually I opened it. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a perfectly tailored suit despite the heat. His briefcase was leather, expensive, worn smooth from years of use. He looked like someone from a different world, one where people still believed in honor and doing things right. "Michael Torres?" he asked. "Yes. I'm an attorney. I represent the estate of James Arthur Torres, your late father." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the words. "My father's been dead for 2 years." "Correct. And there's been a trust in his name, managed carefully by a firm in Delaware that has recently matured. Your mother, Mary Torres, is the primary beneficiary. I've been trying to reach her for weeks. Her phone goes to voicemail and she hasn't responded to my letters." My heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt sideways. "She's alive?" Solis looked confused. "I would certainly hope so." "The trust is substantial, over $2 million. Your father was a careful investor, Mr. Torres. He bought stock in several tech companies in the 90s when they were practically worthless, and he held on to them. He wanted to ensure your mother would be taken care of if anything happened to him. $2 million. My father, who'd worked in a factory and then drove a delivery truck after the factory closed, had left Mom a fortune, and I'd abandoned her to die. I don't know where she is," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. Solis frowned, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. "That's concerning. She's not at this address." "No, we had an argument. She left. Do you have any way to contact her?" "This is time-sensitive. There are tax implications, legal documents that need her signature." "I'll try to find her," I said, though I had no idea how. "If I do, I'll have her call you." Solis handed me a card, heavy stock embossed lettering, and left, his shoes clicking down the driveway to a black sedan. I watched him drive away, then fell to my knees right there in the doorway. A neighbor walking her dog crossed the street to avoid me. I fell to my knees right there in the doorway, my body heaving with sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal, a place I didn't know existed until that moment. It took me 2 more days of desperate searching before I found her. I called every hospital and clinic within 100 miles, described her over and over to bored receptionists and sympathetic nurses. Mary Torres, 72 years old, about 5'3", grey hair. She would have come in with heat stroke. Most of them had nothing. A few offered to check their systems and never called back. Finally, a young woman at a tiny clinic in a place called Salvation Wells said, "Oh, you mean Mary? Yeah, she's here." "Well, not here. She's staying with Joanna." "Who's Joanna?" "The woman who found her. Saved her life, actually. Your mom's real lucky. Another hour in that heat. I got directions to the house. I drove there like a man possessed, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel, rehearsing apologies that could never be enough. What do you say to someone you tried to kill through abandonment? How do you ask for forgiveness for the unforgivable?" The house was modest, painted a fading yellow with white trim that was peeling in places. There was a small garden in front. Someone had been trying to grow vegetables, though the desert wasn't making it easy. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch railing. I parked on the street and sat there for 10 minutes, unable to move. Finally, I forced myself out of the car. My legs felt weak. I climbed the 3 steps to the porch and knocked. Joanna answered. She was smaller than I expected, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. When she saw me, her face hardened into something cold and dangerous. "I'm looking for Mary Torres," I said. "Who are you?" "I'm her son." "The one who left her to die?" Her voice was flat, factual, like she was stating a simple truth. The words hit me like a physical blow. "How did you—" "She told us. When she finally woke up. She was delirious at first, talking about you, worried that something had happened to you, that maybe you'd been in an accident, that you'd come back for her. But I could see it in her eyes. Once the fever broke, she knew." Joanna started to close the door. "She doesn't want to see you. Please." I put my hand on the door, not pushing, just holding it there. "Please, I need to talk to her." "I need to explain—" "Explain what? That you threw away your own mother? That you left a sick old woman in the desert to die because it was convenient? It wasn't. I didn't—" But the words stuck in my throat because she was right. That's exactly what I'd done. "There's nothing you can say that will make this better," Joanna said. "Just go." "There's money," I blurted out. "My father left her money. A lot of it. Over $2 million. She needs to know. There's a lawyer, paperwork she needs to sign. She needs to—" "Money?" Joanna's laugh was bitter and sharp. You think that fixes this? You think you can buy your way out of what you did? No, no, I need her to know she's taken care of, that she doesn't have to worry, that she can... The door opened wider. Anna stood there, still wearing that same faded blue dress, looking up at me with those dark, knowing eyes. She was smaller than I expected, barely came up to Joanna's waist, but there was something about her presence that filled the doorway. Let him in, Anna said quietly. Joanna looked down at the girl, surprised. Anna, honey, I don't think... She needs to hear him. Even if she doesn't forgive him, she needs to hear him. That's how these things work. There was something in Anna's voice, something old and certain that didn't match her childlike appearance, that made Joanna step aside. I walked into the house, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. The interior was simple but clean. Worn furniture that didn't match, windows with thin curtains that let in the harsh sunlight, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs. It smelled like soup and medicine and something else, care maybe. Attention, the kind of smell a home gets when people actually live in it and look after each other. Mom was sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket despite the heat outside. She'd lost weight. Her cheeks were hollow, her hands skeletal where they rested on the blanket. But she was alive. She was breathing. When she saw me, her face went blank. Not angry, not sad, just carefully neutral. Michael, she said. No warmth. No tears, just my name, like she was identifying a stranger. I dropped to my knees beside her chair, my vision blurring with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know who I became. Talia, Don't, Mom said quietly, her voice thin but firm. Don't blame your wife. You made the choice. You opened the car door. You drove away. Those were your hands, your decision. I know I did. And I'll never forgive myself, not ever. But I need you to know, Dad left you money. A lot of it. There's a lawyer named Andrew Solis. He's been trying to reach you. Over $2 million in a trust. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. You can get the best care, live anywhere you want, have anything you need. I'll take care of everything. I'll make this right. Stop, Mom said, holding up one shaking hand. Just stop talking for a moment. I stopped. The room was silent except for the ticking of a clock somewhere and the distant hum of a refrigerator. Mom looked at me for a long moment, studying my face like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she turned to Joanna, who was standing in the doorway with Anna beside her. These women saved my life, Mom said slowly, her voice getting stronger. When I was dying in the dirt, when my own son had left me to die, they didn't leave me. They didn't drive past. Joanna used the last money she had, money she needed to survive, to start over, to rent this house and take care of me. She changed my clothes when I was too weak to move. She held water to my lips when I couldn't lift my arms. Hannah brought me water in the desert and sat with me through the fever, singing songs I'd never heard before. Anna smiled softly at the memory. They're strangers, Michael, Mom continued. Complete strangers who had no reason to help me, no obligation, nothing to gain. And they treated me with more love than my own son. More love than the person I raised, who I fed and clothed and sent to college, who I loved with everything I had. The words shattered something inside me. I felt myself breaking apart piece by piece. I want to use that money, Mom said, and there was steel in her voice now, a strength I'd forgotten she had, to give Joanna and Anna a real home, a place where they don't have to worry about rent or surviving or starting over. Joanna was abandoned by her own family when she was young. Her parents threw her out when she was 16, and she's been alone most of her life, working terrible jobs and sleeping in her car sometimes, and just trying to make it to the next day. Joanna looked away, tears running down her face. And Anna? Mom glanced at the little girl who was watching everything with that strange, calm expression. Anna's story is her own to tell, but she's special, and they're my family now, the family that chose me when I had nothing to offer, when I was just a sick old woman dying in the desert. Mom, please, I forgive you, Michael. She reached out and touched my cheek with her thin, cool fingers, and I started to cry harder. I forgive you because I'm your mother, and that's what mothers do. It's not a choice, really. It's just what happens when you love someone the way a mother loves a child. But forgiving you doesn't mean I want to live with you anymore. It doesn't mean I trust you. It doesn't mean we go back to how things were. I understand, I whispered. Do you? Because I don't think you do. I want to stay here, with Joanna and Anna, with the people who saw me at my worst and didn't turn away, who didn't calculate what I was worth or whether I was too much trouble. They just helped because that's what decent people do. Andrew Solis arrived the next day with all the paperwork in a leather portfolio. Mom signed everything with Joanna beside her, reading through each document carefully. The money was transferred into Mom's account. $2.3 million after taxes and fees. More money than any of us had ever imagined. The first thing Mom did was buy a bigger house in Salvation Wells. Nothing fancy, she didn't want fancy, but a real home with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a kitchen with modern appliances. It had a garden in the back where she could sit in the shade and a front porch with room for rocking chairs. She paid cash for it, and the realtor, a jovial man named Tom who kept saying cash offer like it was the most amazing thing he'd ever heard, processed everything in less than a week. She paid off Joanna's debts, which weren't much but had been crushing her for years. She enrolled Joanna in a nursing certification program at the community college in the next town over, covering tuition and books and everything else. She set up a trust for Anna's education, managed by Andrew Solis, that would cover everything from elementary school through college and beyond if Anna wanted it. She bought new furniture and filled the refrigerator with food and hired painters to redo the whole house in warm, cheerful colors. She created a home, a real home, with the people who'd shown her what family actually means. I visited once a month. I'd call first, ask if it was okay, and Mom would always say yes. She'd make tea. She always made tea, the same kind she used to make when I was a kid, and we'd sit in the living room or on the back porch and talk about small things. The weather, books she was reading, how Joanna's classes were going, Anna's school projects, but I could feel the distance. It was like talking to someone through glass. You could see them, hear them, but you couldn't quite reach them. The thing I'd broken couldn't be repaired with visits and apologies and good behavior. Some things, once broken, stay broken. You just have to learn to live with the pieces. Talia's divorce papers arrived 6 weeks after she left. I signed them without a fight. She wanted the house, the car, half of everything. I gave it to her. What did it matter? I sold what was left, moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment near my office, started seeing a therapist named Dr. Kim who had kind eyes and never let me off the hook for anything. "You can't undo what you did," Dr. Kim said in one of our sessions. "That's the hardest thing to accept. You want there to be some grand gesture, some way to make it right, but there isn't. You just have to be different now. Be the person who would never do that again." So I tried. I volunteered at a senior center, helping elderly people with their taxes and paperwork. I donated money to organizations that helped the homeless, the abandoned, the forgotten. I showed up for my therapy appointments. I learned to sit with my guilt instead of running from it. And once a month I drove out to Salvation Wells to see my mother. A year later, I was sitting in that garden behind Mum's house, watching Anna water the tomato plants. She'd grown taller. Kids do that. But she still had that same strange calmness about her, like she knew secrets the rest of us hadn't learned yet. The tomatoes were thriving, fat and red on the vine, and there were peppers growing too, and herbs that made the whole garden smell green and alive. "You're a good person now," Anna said suddenly, not looking at me, her attention focused on the watering can. "I don't know about that. You're trying. That's what matters." She turned and smiled, and again I saw that strange light in her eyes like sunset reflecting off water. "Your mom sees it too. She told Joanna last week that she's proud of you." "She said that?" "She did. Joanna was surprised. But your mom said you're doing the work and that's what counts." I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been knotted tight for a year. It wasn't forgiveness. I didn't deserve that yet. Might never deserve it. But it was something. Recognition, maybe. A small acknowledgement that I was different than I'd been. Mum came out with lemonade on a tray, 3 glasses sweating in the heat. Joanna was at work. She'd gotten a job at Dr. Reyes's clinic, helping with intake and basic care, using what she'd learned in her classes. She loved it. She'd told me once shyly that she felt like she'd finally found her purpose. It was just the 3 of us now, sitting in the shade of a desert willow tree that Anna had helped plant, listening to the wind move through the leaves. "I'm proud of you," Mum said suddenly, setting down her lemonade. I looked at her, surprised and hopeful and terrified all at once. For what? For not giving up. For doing the work, as Anna says. A lot of people make terrible mistakes and just run from them. They blame everyone else, they make excuses, They pretend it didn't happen. You stayed. You faced what you did. That takes courage. I didn't have a choice. You did. You could have disappeared, changed your number, moved away, convinced yourself I was better off without you. People do that all the time, but you stayed, even though it was hard, even though I couldn't give you what you wanted. I had to. I couldn't lose you completely. You haven't, she said, and her voice was softer now. But some things can't go back to how they were. The relationship we had before, where I was just your mother and you were just my son and everything was simple, that's gone. We can't get it back. We just have to figure out how to move forward with what we have now. Anna handed me a glass of lemonade, and her small hand squeezed mine for just a second. Her skin was cool despite the heat, and I felt something pass between us. Not quite a message, more like a reminder. Forward is good, she said. We sat there as the sun moved across the sky, talking about small things and big things and everything in between. Mom told me about the book club she'd joined at the library, how she was reading novels she'd never had time for when she was working. Joanna had started dating someone, a nurse named Marcus who worked at the hospital in the next town. Anna talked about her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who was teaching them about the stars. It wasn't the relationship I'd had with my mother before. It was smaller, more careful, bounded by what I'd broken. But it was real. It was honest. And maybe that was worth something. I don't know where Anna came from. I asked once, carefully, and Mum just smiled and said, "Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe she was just a kid in the right place at the right time, or maybe she was something more, an angel, a miracle, whatever you want to call those moments when the universe decides to be kind. But I know this. She taught me that second chances don't erase the past. They don't undo the harm or make the guilt disappear. They just give you a chance to build something better with the time you have left." Mom lived in that house for another 15 years. She and Joanna became inseparable, not like mother and daughter, more like sisters, like two people who'd survived the same war and understood each other in ways no one else could. They traveled together, took classes together, built a life together. Anna grew up and went to college on the East Coast, studying social work, because she wanted to help people the way she'd helped Mom. She came home for every holiday, bringing friends and stories, and a warmth that made that yellow house in the desert feel more like home than any mansion ever could. I kept visiting. Once a month, religiously, like a pilgrim seeking something I might never fully reach. But I went. I always went. It was on one of those days, 15 years after that terrible afternoon in the desert, that I got the call from Joanna. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the pain hidden behind the carefully chosen words. "Michael, you need to come. It's your mother." The cancer had come silently, as it usually does. Lungs, ironically, the same lungs I had condemned to the scorching desert sun years ago. Dr. Reyes, now retired but still consulting on special cases, said she had maybe 3 months, maybe 6 if she was lucky. Mom didn't want aggressive treatment. "I've lived a good life," she told me, sitting in that same chair by the window where I had knelt years ago, begging for forgiveness. "I've lived longer than I deserved after that day, and I lived surrounded by true love. That's more than most people get. I moved to Salvation Wells those last months. I quit my job, they understood. I rented a small apartment 3 blocks from the yellow house and spent every day there along with Joanna and Anna, who had come back from college to be present. We took turns. I read to her, books she loved, poetry that made her smile. Joanna handled her medical needs with a tenderness that broke my heart. Anna simply sat beside her, holding her hand, singing those strange and beautiful songs that no one else seemed to know. "You've become a good man, Michael," Mom told me one afternoon, her voice weak but firm. Her fingers, now so thin they looked like dry branches, squeezed mine. "Not the man you were, but the man you chose to become after falling. That's more valuable." "I don't feel good," I confessed, tears flowing freely. "I still feel the weight every day. I still see that road, still hear your voice calling me." "Good," she said, and her eyes, still so clear even with the disease, met mine. "That means you haven't forgotten. It means you've learned. The guilt that transforms us is different from the guilt that destroys us. You've learned the difference." She passed away on a spring morning, with all of us around her bed. Sunlight came through the window, soft and golden, no longer cruel like that day in the desert. Joanna held one hand, I held the other, and Anna stood at the foot of the bed, singing softly. Her last words were, "Thank you for staying. Thank you for showing me what a real family is. I don't know if she was talking to me or to the others. Maybe she was talking to all of us. The funeral was small, as she had requested. The book club came, the clinic staff, Marcus, who had married Joanna 2 years earlier. Some neighbors who had learned to love that small, resilient woman who grew tomatoes and always had fresh lemonade. I gave the eulogy. I spoke about the woman who raised me, about her sacrifices, about how she had taught me about true love, not through words but through her actions, about how she had taught me about forgiveness, not through easy absolution but through difficult truth. And I spoke about what I learned in that desert, that the worst versions of ourselves are always waiting, ready to emerge when we're afraid. That true character isn't never falling, it's choosing to get up and do differently. Afterward, when everyone had left and it was just me, Joanna, Anna and Marcus at the cemetery, Joanna hugged me. "She loved you, you know," she said, "until the end. She was proud of you." "I didn't deserve it," I replied. "Maybe not, but that's how a mother's love works. It's not about deserving, it's about choosing to love anyway." She stepped back and looked me in the eyes. "And that's how redemption works too. You don't deserve it. You just do the work day after day, until one day you look back and realize you've become someone different." I stayed in Salvation Wells. There was nothing waiting for me in the big cities anymore, and I discovered I liked that smaller, simpler life. I opened a small accounting office, helping people with taxes, financial planning, practical things. I charged little. Sometimes I charged nothing. I continued at the senior center, continued donating, continued doing the work. The yellow house was left to Joanna and Anna in Mom's will. They kept it exactly as it was, the garden blooming, the rocking chairs on the porch, the smell of care and attention in every room. I have dinner there once a week, Mondays usually. Joanna cooks, Marcus tells bad jokes, and Anna, now a social worker working with families in crisis, shares stories about the people she's helping. Sometimes, on those nights, I look around the table and think about the miracle of being there. Not because I deserve it, but because extraordinary people decided to believe I could change. This is my story, the story of how I became the worst kind of person and then, through pain and hard work, managed to build something better on the ruins of what I destroyed. But maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe it's yours too. We all have our deserts. Moments where we become people we don't recognize, choices that haunt us, relationships we broke, trust we betrayed. The question isn't whether you've already failed. The question is, what are you going to do now? Are you going to run from the guilt, hide it, pretend it didn't happen? Or are you going to do the difficult and transformative work of becoming someone different? I'm here to tell you 3 things. First, you're not alone, no matter how terrible your mistake was, no matter how deep your shame. Other people have been through this and found a way back. Second, real change is possible. Not easy change, not instant transformation, but true change built day after day, choice after choice. Third, you need to start now, not tomorrow, not when you're ready, now. Because every day you wait is one less day of becoming who you could be. If this story touched something in you, if you recognize your own desert, your own Talia, your own person you abandoned, here's your first step. Share this story. Send it to someone who's struggling. Post it on your social media. Start a conversation, because change begins when we stop pretending we're okay and start being honest about our failures. And then, do one thing, one concrete action, today, that the person you want to be would do. Apologize, make a donation, volunteer, get therapy, forgive someone, forgive yourself, just one thing, and then tomorrow, do another. That's how you build a new life on the ashes of the old one. Anna told me once, redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about using the weight of it to build something stronger. Carry your weight, but build something with it. This story continues in each of us. How it ends depends on the choices we make now.